All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We are ready to start right now. So I would like to give a short introduction and especially to welcome all the panelists, including, of course, the moderator to this first event on the topic 25 years of Dayton Peace Agreement. Do Bosnians and Herzegovinians want a liberal, democratic and prosperous country? My name is Stephanie FENKART from the International Institute for Peace. I'm going to give a very short introduction. Then we are going to show you a video of around 15 minutes, and then Adnan will take over and moderate the session. The Dayton Peace Agreement is turning 25 years tomorrow. I mean, that was the anniversary of the initialing of the agreement, and on 14th of December 2020 is the anniversary of the signature. We're going to have a second event then. We are marking this anniversary by organizing two events. Today is the first one, which are looking at the agreement beyond the important fact that it brought a much-needed peace to Bosnia and Herzegovina. We want to address the ongoing struggle to transform the country into a liberal and prosperous democracy based on the rule of law and economy. We are furthermore also marking this anniversary by recording short interviews from what we call champions of a liberal, democratic and prosperous Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we already published those in advance on our social media and webpage. You can, of course, see more on our Facebook, Twitter, and on our web under the Western Balkans Initiative. We want to mark this 25 years anniversary not necessarily by looking at the past, but by looking at the present and also by looking at the future. While the goal of bringing Bosnia and Herzegovina to the European Union and also transforming the country into a liberal democracy with a prosperous society remains the goal of both Bosnia and Herzegovina and the European Union, too often Bosnia and Herzegovina is described as a place that lost energy, where people leave and nothing happens or changes. I would also, of course, like to thank our partners, the Karl-Renner-Institut and the Austrian Institute for International Affairs, which is also Vedran's institute, who have been partnering in this already since 2 years. And I would especially like to thank Adnan Ćerimagić, who came up with this whole idea and who also did like all the interviews we have been conducting before and who identified all the people. And so thank you very much, Adnan, for your effort. I very much look forward to the video we're going to show in some seconds. What we try to do with this is to reach out to those also who stayed, who were fighting on the ground and who also bring about changes and who also have success in this. So I would say we can already start. And Luca, please insert the video. So this is the story. Afterwards, I will give the floor to Adnan. So thanks again to all the participants. I hope you enjoy this discussion. And now, Luca, you can insert the video. Thank you very much.
I continue to be in awe of the young people here because despite the environment that they kind of grew up in, that they come to our programs and are very willing to foster change and to do so with like-minded peers. So to me, there is a very, very huge potential in young people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, despite the very obvious narrative that has been kind of flourishing, that they are lethargic or that they are incompetent or unwilling to create change or even unable to do so. In our programs, we really meet young people who come from remote, isolated communities, which come from divided, segregated environments. And despite those circumstances, they are more than willing and able to foster the changes that are necessary in achieving a democracy. Because the Bosnian democracy, as it is now, we all know, is very fragile, and it has been up to the civil society for decades to forge any kind of lasting change. And I think that given the immense work put into this by the civil society and the young people who are very actively engaged in fostering change, we must offer them a space to do so, and to do so under the most optimal circumstances.
If there were no people fighting for better Bosnia, I think the situation would have been far worse than it is. There are a number of really optimistic, full of energy, hope, activists, really change makers doing something in different fields of society, starting from youth, women, marginalized groups, poverty, social issues, environmental issues. There are so many issues that we have to deal with and improve here in Bosnia. And I personally, I really admire what these environmental activists have been doing for the past 10 years. Over 10 years, there are people who are defending these rivers and who are not giving up. And it's really a marvelous inspiration. And I feel really proud and to be part of them, privileged to fight this battle together with them. But there are other as well people, activists, running smaller foundations, smaller organizations, organizing children and young people, because I really think that whatever we do, even if we are solving environmental issues, we have to work with young people. We have to have them on our side. We have to spark their interest. So there are organizations who are, I would say, building those better generations to come who will take over this world, this part of the planet. At the same time, I also admire organizations and group of people. Sometimes they are not organized. They are non-formal group of people supporting the ones in need, like socially disadvantaged people, like elderly or children in the street, or very poor families who are collecting donations and distributing them in a way that they provide the existential means for those families.
In Bosnia and Herzegovina exists a pretty number of people that actually care about development of democracy in our country. They still, those people who remain in this country, there are a lot of them who have the local initiatives, they have individual initiatives. They've been active in different kind of humanitarian works, but also a lot of them they are in small communities, but even in the bigger communities, you don't know for them. And why is that? Because the main, all TV stations in Bosnia and Herzegovina is not talking about those people. Who is actually fulfilling the prime time of TV stations in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Politicians and politicians who rarely did something positive in this country. When I say that politicians, it's mainly, three main political parties in Bosnia and Herzegovina have the greatest time spending on TVs in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this is why is possibly looking from abroad that we don't have anyone to work on different things: environmental protection, river protection, forest protection, whatever it is. I think this perception is one of the responsibility has to definitely goes to media, those who have TV, and also through all other international community that are not taking care, and even they don't Google it. I have few examples of pretty visible and present ignorance of the local people that work in international community, but also representatives who never Google it. Who is doing environmental protection in Bosnia and Herzegovina? If you do it, you put activism, you put actions, you put environmental protection, and then you will have a lot of stories, not only about our organization, but 10 most active organizations in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So not only within NGOs, but also as individual, which we are trying to, our networking in EcoBih network, we are trying to gather them and to help them to share our resources and also to raise their visibility, because we notice that the international community actually, it seems, doesn't appreciate it much.
I believe there are many champions. Some are visible, some are not. Some are present in the media, others not so much. But I know so many young and old people who are very keen on being professional and doing their job and using their knowledge and their energy to make this country a better place to live for everyone. I know so many young people who are LGBTIQ activists here in Bosnia and Herzegovina who are working. If they lived in another country, I think it would be much easier for them to raise their voice, to know to whom they're speaking when they're requesting certain things. And now I'm speaking, of course, about the complex political system. And these people, I think, have used their voices and their activism to bring about certain change. But due to this kind of division of our political system, these successes somehow remain limited to a certain geographical area. And as I said, if they were living in other countries, I think by using the same amount and level of energy and activism, I think they would bring about change that would impact lives of so many more people than they can do now. But still, I think the bravery in this is that we and they as activists know that they're working in environment which is as it is currently, but they're not giving up. So bringing change and speaking on behalf of people in Federation of Bosnia or Republika Srpska or in certain cantons still brings change. Change to those people living there. So I think we're painfully aware of these limitations in a way, but I also think that a lot of activists have in the back of their heads and our heads an issue that this country and society could look a lot different. And I think in that term it would be inspirational to mention something that happened in Chile a few days ago as a result of a protest, which again is spurred by activists and people from the ground. They had a referendum where now the people in an overwhelming majority decided that they want to have a new constitution. So I think people who engage in activism and who are speaking about inequality, whether it's about inequality that affects one group or speaking in wider terms about different inequalities that affect all of our lives, can bring about constitutional change. So it's one inspirational thing that we can actually keep in our minds as activists and as champions of change. So it's these voices and bodies in the streets and raising the voice and pointing to certain issue can lead to change that usually people kind of think about parliaments making and making these decisions. So I think it's really it's brave of so many of these people who are doing their job and who are not kind of losing the hope that we can still be a much better society and country than we are currently.
That there is a large group of people who do believe that Bosnia and Herzegovina could be a prosperous democratic country that will be a member of the EU, because the only way for Bosnia and Herzegovina to prosper is to join the EU or to continue with the reforms. So I do believe that the group is large, maybe larger than we normally would think, but we are scattered around. We are not unified in the same context as political parties, and we are very much intimidated and very often threatened by the dominant nationalist rhetorics and dominant nationalist politics. I believe that all of us who decided to adopt some of the global positive practices in NGO sector, in media sector, in business sector, and the others are basically members of that group who are actually believing that Bosnia and Herzegovina deserves a better future. That the problem is that our voice is often silenced by the other narratives that are more pronounced, I would say, that are more common and more aggressive. In a sense that we are trying to affect the process by doing, not by saying, which is not typical for the nationalist narratives, which is very loud but without delivering any results. But in a sense that we do believe that Bosnia is progressing. I can basically testify from the experience of Tim, because when we started doing what we are doing, corruption was not mentioned. Corruption was not even anticipated as a problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Today, 15 years down the road, corruption is very often mentioned as being the first or the most appealing problem in dealing with reforms in Bosnia and Herzegovina, not by the professionals who are working in the field, but by ordinary citizens who are actually perceiving corruption as a problem. I think that's a success, and I think those successes could only be enlarged, and we just have to recognize that we have a strength as a group.
So the education of young politicians in Bosnia and Herzegovina as a unique approach in political education that in continuation lasts more than 30 years, we really know and find out that there are lots of people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially among young generation and the young population, that are ready for the progress and contribution in democratization and the progress of the society. So let's say and specify by categories, definitely among the young people and activists within the non-governmental and civil society organizations, there are lots of people that really look forward and according to European perspective and dimensions. Actually, and also among young politicians, there are lots of people that are really dedicated for cooperation and communication at the Bosnia and Herzegovina level as well as at the regional level.
So for the past 9 years, I had the opportunity to work with young leaders and women leaders in BIH, and from what I've seen is that there are absolutely progressive leaders in BIH, both young and women leaders who have tremendous knowledge and amazing skill sets to be important partners for everyone, you know, like in BIH and the region and the EU. And I think what is needed is to engage them in, you know, discussions and treat them as equal partners. I sense that a lot of times when we talk about young leaders, we sort of think of them as someone who needs additional skills or needs additional knowledge. But my experience shows that in many cases they have a much better skill set and better understanding and deeper knowledge. And then when it comes to language also, you know, if they're fluent in English or German, then their counterparts, you know, their senior counterparts, some of the elected officials that we as international organizations or institutions interact with, or some political party officials that we interact with. So instead of looking at young leaders as, you know, the future of BIH, let's engage them now, because once we do realize that they are the true partners that we need to talk with, and it's not about their future, it's about the present and them, engaging them in those meaningful discussions about where the country is heading. The mere fact that 82% of respondents in our public opinion survey this year said that the country is heading in the wrong direction means that we're doing something wrong, that we need to change course, and we need maybe also to change or expand the network of partners that we engage with. And I think doing that with young people is a good and important start.
There are so many people in Bosnia like myself. I don't know whether that's good or bad. I mean, if you're asking me if they are more brave people who are, brave enough to say what they think and to criticize when something needs to be criticized. There are, but of course, we don't get media coverage. Because, I mean, that's not even typical, something specific only for Bosnia or for the region. I guess it's a phenomenon all around the world. Look what happened with Trump, right? So you get the media coverage even if you are saying nonsense and stupid things and radical extremist opinions and views. You get, I mean, you even get more media coverage. More people know about you. You are hitting all social media. The problem of of people who are decent and polite and want to do the things on the right and legal way, respecting all the rules and respecting democratical values, right? It seems sometimes that they seem like boring people and boring topics. So it seems that we are living in this spectacle times that you need to be a superstar in these big shows or know how to sing, that you get media coverage when you are talking about transparency, fight against corruption, when you are giving constructive criticism. Well, you don't get a lot of public. So, I mean, that's the problem. It's not that there are not people, there are, but these are the issues. And then, of course, every day it's less of us because people get tired in their lives, because people lost hope, I think. I hope these elections in Mostar and the change that we will hopefully make will be a good example. So let's see.
Yes, I think we can start. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for spending your time with us to mark 25 years of Bosnian and Herzegovinian peace. I would like to start by thanking the International Institute for Peace, and in particular Stephanie and Hannes and their team for giving us a platform to do this. But I also would like to thank Austrian Institute for International Affairs and the Karl-Renner-Institut for also supporting this. And obviously, my great thanks goes to these champions that together with the International Institute for Peace, we've picked up to ask and to give them floor to say what they think. Today's panel is the first, as Stephanie said, of two that will happen. Another one will be on 14th of December. And today we wanted actually to discuss mostly with Bosnians and Herzegovinians or with people living in Bosnia and Herzegovina about the issue of yes, we have peace, and that is something you can hear at many conferences that are taking place these days on Dayton or reading a lot of paper. There is peace, but what is happening next to that peace? How far are we when it comes to building Bosnia and Herzegovina that is a liberal, democratic, and a prosperous country? And more importantly, who are those people who are doing that on the ground in Bosnia and Herzegovina? And that was the idea of this panel, basically, to discuss about that. We've gathered here people who have, I would say, three main mixes, and I think that is important for us when we look back at the Dayton Peace Agreement and Bosnia and Herzegovina today. First is a generational one. We are all young, I would say, but we were not same age when the war started or when the Dayton Peace Accord was signed. So our perspectives immediately on what was the Dayton Peace Agreement and what it means 25 years later are or should be or could be different. Another one is a geographic one. All four of us, all participants today, all five of us come from, were born and raised in different parts of both Bosnia and Herzegovina and the world. We have someone from Prijedor, someone from Sarajevo, Jajce, me from Vračić, and an American who decided to move to Bosnia and Herzegovina to live there. And then there's a third mix, which is important, that is where we decided to live today. I live in Berlin. We have two of the panelists living in Vienna who are going back and forth in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have a participant from Jajce who was also going back and forth. So I think this mix will give a very, very good and different and variety of perspectives on the Dayton Peace Accords. Without further ado, I would actually like us to start with the panel. And first one that will speak will be Mr. Randall Puljek-Shank, who is a program advisor at PeaceNexus Foundation, an American who decided willingly to move to Bosnia and Herzegovina and who has been living there for 18 years. Mr. Randall has basically took part was part of the team that was doing a European values study in Bosnia and Herzegovina for the first time, a study that has been done in numerous of countries since 1981, and that is very thorough, very detailed, very good methodology, very detailed and very well-structured methodology. So I think he's the one who can best tell us at this moment is when we speak about general population, about citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the state of their relations to values, be it to democracy or to liberal values or other values. So I would like to give the floor to Randall, who can then maybe share with us a little bit of the study and what is interesting to answer our paper, to answer our question whether there are champions of a liberal, democratic, and prosperous Bosnia and Herzegovina. Randall, I give you the floor.
Great, thank you, Adi, and thanks to IAP for the invitation. So the European Values Study, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, asks questions of what citizens think about life and family, work, politics, and society. And what's particular about it is the same questions get asked every 10 years in almost all European countries and many other ones around the world. So I'll give you a couple highlights that really respond to this question. I'll start with the one, do citizens, the democratic part. So on one hand, a democratic system is the most popular option of the several options that are asked in the study. So that's about 65% think that that's important, although that's much lower than in more established democracies. And one really interesting piece of that is that there's a big difference between the Federation and the RS. This survey was done in 2019, by the way, which is that in the RS, 10% of the people think that having a strong leader is a good idea, whereas in the Federation, 26% of them do. So this suggests that having experienced the reality in the RS, citizens are much more critical of this idea and supportive of and supportive of democracy. Then, of course, the question is, what does democracy mean? Because it means many things to different people. What does it mean to citizens? So there, what's surprising is that citizens actually do have a very liberal understanding of democracy. So they were asked about 20 options of what does democracy mean. And the most essential, according to Bosnian citizens, is that women have the same rights as men. Okay, so certainly an idea that's not so common we can see in society. And that's followed by choose leaders by free elections and civil rights protect people from state oppression. So this liberal idea is quite strong, and that's followed by several ones that we could call social democracy. The state provides unemployment aid, it reduces income inequality, and so on. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is this very common idea that what needs to happen is a younger generation needs to be brought forth, and we can see these what the younger generation thinks by comparing the results of this of those people who were born since 95, what we call Generation Z. So on the one hand, this group, in comparison to the older ones, are more likely to have reported participating in a demonstration as a form of political participation, to be a member of an association, to be volunteering. But on the other hand, they report voting at much lower rates. So some forms of political participation, I think, are growing, but voting is, this is definitely a concern going forward. They also express higher confidence in political institutions, even though confidence is very low overall. They have more confidence in the integrity of elections and how democratic BIH is, but they're also more convinced that politics is corrupt. So I think a mixed picture as far as what this new generation will bring forth as they continue to age, because one of the ways that societies change is a younger generation brings new values and the older generation slowly dies off, and so we have a change process. We hear a lot of negative things about Bosnia. So I thought to take a couple minutes to highlight some positive news out of the study. So, and this is, we can make this comparison because the same questions were asked in 2008 and 2019. So we can see some changes that might not otherwise be visible to us. So quite a few more people, almost twice as many people, reported that they had participated in a demonstration in this wave. So that's quite surprising, and I think something that maybe we can't quite see yet in terms of participation. Then there's an idea that really it's social capital through belonging to associations, which is bringing about a positive, constructive democracy. So this looks at the connection between membership in an association, and that builds trust, and that makes democracy work, is the idea. So if you follow that theory, in fact, membership in associations has increased by 2.5 times, right? 250% in 10 years. Again, not very visible on the surface, but I think connects really well with some of the things that the videos were talking about. So the final thing is that, positive news is that citizens have a very liberal understanding of democracy. So they think that democracy is somewhere else. Now, they don't see BIH as very democratic, but is that idea, they have it quite. And I'll just close with a question about the prosperous part of the question, because I wonder really who is against prosperity, right? So in posing this question this way, I think it's a little bit muddles the fact that there are many different ideological ideas about how one gets to prosperity, and we can see those differences among Bosnian citizens. So prosperous, I'm sure everyone would say yes, but how do we get there? I'll close with that.
Thank you very much. I think those were all interesting facts, and I would probably have a zillion of questions now to ask her. But let's go then directly to Samir, actually. Because what you said is that the generation that Samir kind of belongs to, I would say, is more prone to go to protests, maybe less prone to go to vote. I think that in that sense, Samir is an exception because I think he does both, and does both very, very passionately and very frequently. Samir, could you react to what Randall said and to the question that we posed, and maybe to some of the points that were raised in video as a representative of
Sure.
a younger generation?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Randall, also for this introduction and for these very, very interesting details. Sorry. I'm calling in from Jajce, from central Bosnia. We just had elections just past week, and I was working as an election observer with the civic coalition Podlupom, a coalition of NGOs observing elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And even before, during the pre-election campaign, we had this continuous, topics of young people going to vote or not going to vote. And I'm, be honest, even a little bit frustrated by especially foreign representatives, foreign officials, but also people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And even in this study, where it says that young people are not prone to go to vote. However, in 2018, when the Institute for Youth Development, PULT, was demanding and asking for the Central Electoral committee to analyze the who went to vote. This was actually not true. In 2018, as in 2016, as in 2014, the voter turnout among young people who are between 18 and 30 was higher than 50%, which is around a general voter turnout of general population. So that tells us two things. First of all, it tells us that young people are not passive, at least when it comes to voting, that they vote approximately the same as the general population. However, because of the fact that there was no significant change in, who got elected, and then that's another misinterpretation, so to say, that we like to think that if young people will vote, they will bring a change. They will bring something, that the older population is not having in terms of, different kinds of style of thinking, way of thinking, mindset, etc. However, we do have a lot young people who do vote. We also do have young people who are engaged in politics. But the problem is that those young people are not as liberal as we would like to think, are not as democratic as we like to think, and even some of them, as we have seen in the past, are even more nationalistic than their political mothers and fathers. Why? Because in a lot of cases, they're trying to, climb up the party hierarchy by being bigger nationalists, and even nowadays, bigger racists than those who, taught them how to think and how to act. And it's very interesting because then we have this paradigm of young people who are voting as the general population, but at the same time, we do have a new young groups of young people who are not yet in this generation of voting. Young people who are now younger than 18. And this new generation of people seems to be sick and tired by those who were elected until now. One of the best examples comes from my city, from the city of Jajce. In 2016, by the way, for those who do not know, Jajce is a case city, a city with segregated schools, 2 schools under one roof. I attended such a school. It's a school where Bošnjaks attend separate classrooms from their Croat peers. So I have in my neighborhood, I have my friend Dragan, whom we played soccer before going to school. And then we would go together to school. And then in front of the school, Dragan would go from one entrance, from one side of the building, and I from the other. In 2016, politicians in central Bosnia wanted to segregate some rare schools that were ethnically integrated. And you know what happened? Young people, students who are 15, 16, 17, 18, minors basically, stood up against this political decision that came, believe it or not, by SDA and HDZ politicians, by 2 big nationalistic camps of Croats and of Bošnjaks in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This I'm speaking now for central Bosnia. Young people who were both from Bošnjak side and from Croat side decided to stand against this nationalistic, divisive rhetoric that brings us back to the Middle Ages and that doesn't bring young people, to a liberal, democratic, prosperous society, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Those who are a bit older than them have already left, a lot of them, or they are thinking to leave, exactly because of the fact that they do not see a prosperity in this country. And according to the Institute for Youth Development, CULT, when they were doing their research, asking young people why are they leaving, 10 years ago, one of the main elements why people said they would leave is because of, not having a job. Last year and the year before, it was the lack of perspectivity. So I think this new generation of young people who is craving for liberal values, for more freedom, for democracy, for open borders is, I think, our ticket forward. And it's really great to see those young people because they are not burdened by the war. And the case from Jajce has shown us that young people, the main message actually of that movement was that the voice of young people, even if they are minors, is important and it matters. And it can actually change the political will of well-established politicians who have been ruling since the end of the war. And I will also remind you on another very positive case of young people going to protest. Back in 2013, it's already 7 years of that, when Bosnia and Herzegovina blocked joining the Erasmus Plus program, a big educational program funded by the European Commission. Its budget, 7-year budget, was 14.7 billion euros. They said, no, we will not join this program. Young people from Bosnia will not be able to participate in Erasmus, in all the other, trans-border, inter-ethnic, trans-cultural programs. And students from 6 cities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, from student centers, were protesting for half a year. In March 2014, politicians in Bosnia and Herzegovina, ministers of education, both in Federation Bosnia and in Republika Srpska, said, okay, we will listen to your voice, we will join Erasmus+. And I think we need to take in consideration that young people per se, even those who are in politics and those who are voting, will not bring a change. Being young is not enough. Being young is not a virtue. Someone is young because, we were born between 18 and 30 years. And there is currently 610 young voters who are eligible to vote. A bit more than 300,000 votes in these elections. And I can just imagine what kind of a change we would be able to bring if we would be able to garner and bring back all those young people voting. And I think I would stop here, and then I just look forward for more discussions, especially related to education reform in Bosnia and Herzegovina, education reform that will bring more education around democracy, about human rights, about LGBT issues, and of course about environmental issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samir, and thank you for everything that you're doing. You reminded me correctly that I was a bad moderator in a sense that I did not present who you are. Samir Beharić is currently in Jajce and is a board member of the Western Balkans Alumni Association, an association that's doing really a great job. And if we have time, it would also be good to hear about that. Samir and me, we met actually in 2016. As that was happening, we were together in London for a fellowship, and I know how and that is partly just a short generational difference. When I was studying at the University of Graz, I was researching a bit on the returns in the central Bosnia and how the things were happening in 1996, 8, 2000. When you do that to a certain extent, it is a success story, and definitely is what happened and what was established afterwards. But then you get to fast forward to someone like Samir, and you get the information of what the situation is 10 or 15 years after that big work. I would now like to move to Vedran Džihić, who is a senior researcher at the Austrian Institute for International Affairs in Vienna. And Vedran, I would like you maybe to try to touch upon the municipal elections. You wrote a very good article today in Der Standard. For everyone who reads German, I recommend, but to somehow try to put all of this into, you've been doing quite a lot of work with people who are self-organizing and organizing themselves on the field in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the region. But how do we get this energy used, and is it being used now via municipal elections? And before I give floor to Vedran, I just want to point out that Randall was kind enough to put the link to the European Values Study in the chat, so anyone interested in digging more details of this wonderful study, please do so. So I give the floor to Vedran, please.
Thank you so much, Adnan. I mean, this is probably truly a Bosnian Zoom meeting par excellence. So we have Vračić, Jajce, and we have Vienna on the spot as a bit, which basically brings us back to the history. But I'm happy to be here, even though I just discussed in the meantime with Alida whether the two of us are as young as Samir and Adnan are. But this is definitely a different topic. So let me, Adi, by trying to answer your questions, basically to start from a very simple and very important point for me. I mean, states and societies are not only about institutions. They are about institutions. They are about procedures. They are about elections, rule of law. But they are also about political emotions or emotions in general. And when we think of a liberal democracy, we could argue that democratic societies are about optimism and joy. You believe in a future ahead of you, and you don't fear the future ahead of you. Autocracies, obviously, I mean, we see it. I mean, just make a few steps from Vračić to Serbia over the border. and we can easily see what autocracies are about. That's politics of fear. So my fundamental question, and you mentioned the elections, you mentioned the grassroots energies, but I believe 25 years after Dayton, the fundamental question is, where do we look when we want to see energy, when we want to see joy, optimism, beyond Samir Beharić's eyes, because he has this strong voice, he has the energy and the passion. But where I'm kidding a bit, but where do we look beyond that one? And this is where basically the grassroots movements, the civic initiatives, and some of the young people come into the play. So you don't go for joy and optimism to the parliament of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Or to the presidency. These are the palaces of old white men, which is definitely partly also one of the biggest problems of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So the reality is complex. I don't want to neglect the ethnopolitics and the fact that there are interblock institutions. I don't want to neglect that there is a imminent failure of the international community, etc., etc. But let's just for a while look into what we have on the positive side. So the protests in 2013, Samir mentioned them, and the protests in 2014, they brought a lot of also democratic innovation. Look, these assemblies that we as a plena from 2014, as a day, they did not deliver the success that we were hoping for, but they basically defined a normal Bosnia by spelling out demands, by telling basically that we want to have accountable governments, that we want to have rule of law and justice, that we need to go for workers' equality and rights, that we don't want corruption, that we basically want something what Judy Butler so precisely and nicely describes as livable life. Livable life that is worth to live, which for many in Bosnia is not the case. So this is 2014, but look into the floods, 2014, same year in late spring, and we have so many cases of very basically vivid social capital and overcoming the ethnic boundaries between the people and citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which correlates to a certain degree with some findings of Randall's study. Look at later protests like Justice for David, Justice for Jenan in 2017. Look at Samir's fight you didn't mention your fight in Jajce against the segregated schools that was awarded by the Council of Europe, if I'm not mistaken. Look at a lot of small initiatives against air pollution, which is one of the huge problems in Bosnia and Herzegovina, against small hydro plants destroying the Bosnian rivers, etc., etc. So my point is basically, and now I come to the local elections. And when we dig deeper, and we do it on a daily basis, and Adi just contributed largely to explaining basically what happened in Banja Luka on Twitter, and by explaining what happened in Sarajevo. And yes, of course, there is a deeper and bigger picture behind. But the point is, what Bosnia needs is this initial momentum of change. It needs this momentum where you can tell to some people that somewhere in this country, hope has come back. That we might have a mayor in Sarajevo, Bogić Bogićević, who represents and stands for what Bosnia was and still partly is. And these are those champions. We saw them in the video. And this kind of now we have seen small steps and small movements in some of the cities. Some of the successes, the Stani Vukovic's victory in Banja Luka is problematic from a kind of a point of view how he perpetuates some kind of a nationalist rhetoric, or how he was perpetuating this one. But still, it's a momentum against this kind of a despotic, arrogant, ignorant position of Dodik and SNSD, etc., etc. So basically, I believe, and just to underline it again, even in the elections, and when we look in the movements and grassroots energies that I just outlined, and in many other initiatives, I believe that the fundamental question right now for Bosnia is, and this is not impossible, that basically there is a task, and it's doable, to find a space for whatever we understand under. I mean, this is a huge debate among political scientists. What is liberal democracy and what's the future of liberal democracy? But nevertheless, we need to find and liberate a space, a free space, space of equality, space of respect, and keep it as good as we can and as long as we can, so that others can join it and populate it and try to make more out of this. Obviously, it goes without saying that on this path, we will need a changed approach by the US administration. So it might be that we pick it up in the Q&A. It goes without saying that we will need probably a different European Union than the one that we see right now. I mean, it's quite obvious that the EU is struggling right now with Poland and Hungary over the issue of rule of law, is at the same time struggling to promote rule of law in enlargement countries. But these are basically points that I, from my perspective right now, looking into joy, optimism, where do you find it, as I said, beyond Samir's eyes, is the major path for the Bosnian future. So much from my side for the beginning.
No, thank you very, very much. All good points. I would now like to turn to Alida Vračić, who's in Vienna, same as Vedran. She's executive director of Populari think tank, and many other things. I'm tempted, Alida, to ask you about what's the role of diaspora and what the role of diaspora could be, because in 2 interviews that I did and that were in longer version published on the IIP YouTube channel, there was a story from Irma, who's running for elections now, saying that what we would need from diaspora is some kind of a fund that would provide financial, not stability, but financial security to people who want to be activists, want to go into politics, because that is one of the main obstacles for people not to be engaged more in an independent way. And the other thing from Leila Kusturica, where she says that actually this is what she's already doing. She's got diaspora to support her in supporting activists on the ground. So I'm tempted to do that, but I'm also tempted for generational purposes to note down that Alida played an important role in getting Bosnians and Herzegovinians get rid of the visa regime with the EU, something that Samir grew up probably a better part of his life enjoying the liberty, while me and generations before were actually kind of were in the same situation as citizens of Kosovo are today. So Alida, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Excellent. So I really don't know which one of these 2 questions or 3 or 4 questions I would start off with, but maybe I would just say that prior to this conversation, I posted online. I mean, it was my own reflection, to be honest, like what has happened in these 25 years. And basically I said that 25 years since the Dayton Peace Agreement have passed. I was 17 years old at the time, and my generation was really full of energy and keen to learn, travel, discover the world. At the same time, my parents' generation was hoping to restore their lives, at very best, bring some decency back and some optimism. And then I said, but what has really happened? I think today's session is about the first category, very much so, because we are here and we are those people that have found, years coming after 1995 to be very optimistic and very energetic. I remember that I was thinking about going to the coast. I was turning 18. I was really like entering my adulthood, and the world was really mine. But at the same time, we should probably reflect also on this generation that belongs to my parents and even younger and somewhat older ones, because I don't think they have got what they wanted. I mean, their dreams about Bosnia becoming a better place have not really come true. And I'm going to connect it with another thing that I've seen today. There was a film being made today by Zoran Ćatić, Zoki. It's 1-minute film where it starts off with him being basically a soldier in Sarajevo under the siege, and he's like trying to escape the bullets. Then he falls asleep because he's completely exhausted. And he falls asleep and he dreams about 2020. And in 2020, he's watching the TV and it says 19,000 people left Bosnia in the last 2 years. Unemployment is on the rise. Smog is killing and choking people around. And he's watching these news, and then all of a sudden he's back in this 1995. Someone is shaking him up. So, are you crazy? We have to run because we're gonna lose our lives. And he's like, oh, thank God it's the war, because I just had a dream about peace. That is also how some people feel about Bosnia nowadays. Now, going back to your question, because the reason why you asked me is very strategic one, because I spent years working on emigration, diaspora, trying to connect the two. And I think this energy really can come very much so from diaspora, because diaspora, unlike, people that are listening 24/7 news on Bosnia, are actually, they tend to switch off even at some point, because it's just so much of it. And often, actually, it feels like this was something that they've heard before. This happens to me every now and then. I open the newspapers or, some old newspapers, and I swear to God that I've seen this title before. I read this piece before, because it all seems the same to me. At the same time, diaspora has made this move, and it's always a very emotional thing to leave your country, whatever the reasons are. But because they have done that, and they also included themselves into other circles, they present this sort of more energetic and more vibrant circle that can reach out and does reach out very much to Bosnia, but also all other countries in the region. I mean, Bosnia is no exception in this case. And I'm going to use another example that is happening as we speak, and Adi know about it, and some other friends also know about it. 3 years ago, I have started with my better part and some friends a platform to basically try to connect people from all over Bosnia, but also all over the world, with kids in orphanages across Bosnia. And every year we score unbelievable, figures. And as we speak now, more than 1,000 children are going to get gifts from Bosnians and Herzegovinians around the world, from 70 countries. And this also shows that people are never angry, at their friends, at their family. They're very much interested in contributing one way or the other, politically, financially, building up these funds that Irma was talking about. But they're angry at politics, and this is what would really kills them, because they see corruption everywhere and they don't think anything will change. Now, with this wave of change that we have seen in some municipalities in Bosnia, I think we can really start thinking strategically about having a visionary approach towards our diaspora. These people are all over the place. They're sitting in the most unbelievable, workspaces, and they have access to unbelievable information. And if they don't, their networks do. And it's as Samir said once when I talked to him about immigration and diaspora, it's not about who you know, but who your friends know. It goes in several different layers. And we hardly reach out to these people. I've done research on Ireland, and just yesterday, Ireland published new strategy on diaspora, as they always do. Now it's until 2025. And it's very strategically going in certain directions, what they want to do and how they want to connect with diaspora. And often I've heard from Irish, if you have just one person, sometimes one person can change the whole thing. Like Chuck Feeney did it in Ireland. He basically established a fund, university fund, and he coerced his own government in Ireland to basically match these funds. And they did it because they could not lose the face. These types of action, we need more. And I haven't seen, in this respect, I haven't seen that we're strategically thinking about it. It's more about ad hoc measures that we have, or ideas that we have every now and then. So absolutely, I mean, we're talking about, first of all, huge number of people. I mean, no one really knows how many, because it's not like they're really reporting or checking out when they leave, and we know how that works. But at the same time, we know that there are many people around the world who would like to be part of the story and who would like to ride on this wave, as Vedran also said. And I honestly don't see the reason why we shouldn't start thinking about it immediately. So I'm gonna end here, and then we can definitely exchange more things.
I would like to open the floor for the questions from the audience. So please raise the hand function. I think there is it, and we will. And there, I already see some questions there. Alida, would you mind if I stay with you since it's going so well?
Go ahead.
Could you just a little bit share with us your attempt to open up a debate on the role of migrants in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Because I think we're hearing quite a lot of news about Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially Croatian pushbacks to Bosnia and Herzegovina. We hear a lot about mismanagement of migration crisis by, I would say, state authorities predominantly. But can you just give a couple of points so that the audience might?
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of came naturally, to be honest, because I've started off with emigration, because I've seen numbers of people are really going exponentially high, and people are willing to leave. If you look at any barometer, you will see that everyone is like many young people are interested in leaving the country. Then basically that led me to diaspora. But to put it in a circle, to kind of, round it up properly, you cannot speak about any country being successful unless the country decides also to bring in and attract new people. Bosnia is in this very unfortunate situation, I would say, at the moment. You have thousands of people, and I wouldn't manipulate with numbers because they keep on changing, but thousands of people are stranded between Croatia and Bosnia, as far as I'm aware. And if you try to find a bit more information, you will realize that those that have arrived with kids have kids enrolled in some of the Bosnian schools. This is very much the case also in Serbia and some other countries. Their families that are being stuck because they come from countries like Afghanistan, where you have no real solution. For Syria and some other countries, you do have a certain sort of rules. What happens with these migrants if their asylum is not approved. But there are also countries where you cannot make an easy decision. Reality of life, and this is what I'm trying to basically assert, is that some of them will stay. Many of them want to basically move on. They want to go to Austria, they want to go to Germany, they want to go to Norway, Sweden, wherever. But not everyone will be able to do it. And reality of life will be that some of them will stay. Now, looking into experiences of other countries, and I went to Sicily last year, and there was a discussion inevitably about migration and immigrants and what happens with them and immigration. And one of the things that Italy has done is that they have given them certain rights, not citizenship, not, I don't know, like there are all sorts of legal points about it, but right to work, basically, and provide for your own sort of existence, which brings back also decency, if you will. These kind of things we haven't even started discussing. And this is something that I would like to have a more open debate on. I understand fully that this is a super emotionally charged debate, especially in the light of what has happened yesterday or day before yesterday in Sarajevo, where you had an immigrant basically killing another person from Sarajevo. Protests are being held every single day somewhere. But I'm just also sure that we're not from a policy point of view, we're not discussing it right. I mean, first of all, you have to provide for these immigrants to keep them somewhere safe. But second thing is to possibly offer them a possibility to work for their own existence. And there are anecdotal cases where you have people being hired by different employers in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they're actually that symbiosis works very well, but they're also scared to speak about it, both on the side of employer, because they're afraid of their environment, and on the side of immigrants because they don't want to share that experience, being afraid for that what they have got. So if we continue with this kind of not sharing experiences, not discussing it in a proper manner, I think it's going to get even worse, because we can expect, with COVID going down, we can expect more people coming through these routes in the Western Balkans, and we will just perpetuate this problem. So instead, we should probably think of some better experiences. And I mean, Germany is a great example. I was living in Berlin in 2015. We had family from Latakia in our own place for a month. I'm fully aware of how complex this issue is, but at the same time, Germany now has projected, they have projected it already into 2015, that only in 4 or 5 years' time they will see some results of this integration. And now you have actually data coming out, and data shows that many of them, if not 70%, are basically employed and, you know, chipping into the budget as well, but also being able to work for their own prosperity. So all these things are you know, not something that we have to invent. We really have to look around and come up with something smarter than what we have at the moment.
Yeah, and I think you also used the number of foreigners who get working permits in Bosnia and Herzegovina to exemplify that it already is happening. When I meant mismanagement, it's actually by the state, it's actually something that I've also heard in the interviews that we did, and that is that very often civil society is the one that steps into a role that should be taken or is taken in other cases in the region by the state. So they are feeling that. So in that sense, I meant mismanagement. Obviously, the issue on a bigger scale can only be solved at the EU level. Vedran, I want to go reverse. So I want to go to you now with the questions that we got, part of the questions that we got in the questions and answer. First is EU path. How do we move forward the EU path? What's the role for the constitution, current institutional framework in it? What are the perspectives for reforms, and how the new US administration can be helpful in that? Easy questions.
Thank you. I mean, these are the best questions, the easy ones. I mean,
for you.
And finally, the chance to answer the question about the constitution. No, on a serious side. I mean, I saw the question, and when it comes to the Dayton Constitution, it's not. I mean, that's at least my opinion. It's not the Dayton Constitution per se that would not allow for any possible changes and reforms. I mean, they have seen also throughout the 25 years since Dayton that at the beginning of 2000s, some changes were introduced, and some movement is possible. It's when we criticize Dayton, we need to be very precise. I mean, what we have to criticize, this is this kind of a ethnopolitical interblocking ping-pong game between strongholds, political parties that basically, whether they are nationalistic or traditional or conservative or not, I mean, some of them are called social democrats. I mean, it doesn't play a role, but what plays a role basically that behind the concept of this inter-ethnic blocking and ping-ponging table tennis stands a very strong interest in particular issues like how to spend the public money, how to control the institutions, and how to make their wishes come through. And this is precisely the moment. And when we speak about the way forward towards the European Union, when we speak about the role of the United States, then for me it's quite obvious. I mean, what the US, for example, could do is draw some red lines more strongly. I mean, just finish once and for all with this kind of illusion created by those strong men that Dodik is representing the Serb people. I mean, who says that Dodik is representing the Serbs in Bosnia and Herzegovina? I mean, he got some small piece of votes in a very questionable elections. I mean, when it comes to the legitimacy of elections. And who says that Čović and Izetbegović, I mean, Izetbegović is a different story. I mean, he now is suffering and crying somewhere in the corner because he lost so much in Sarajevo. But basically, this question of representation has to be put upside down. And for those that are basically crossing the red lines permanently for the sake of their own interests, there are new red lines. And this package then has to include, I mean, whatever is on the table, what was promised to be fulfilled has to be fulfilled. I mean, we need also to go back and find a kind of a decent European solution according to human rights and fundamental rights for the Sejdić-Finci case. We cannot forget that one and just move forward as nothing has happened, and as there is no discrimination in Bosnia. So this is basically both the way towards the European Union, but also the potential influence of the Biden administration, as well as the Dayton question. This is precisely probably what Alida just mentioned. This is the question of momentum. This is the question of momentum. I mean, there was a momentum when we had the constitutional proposal, the famous or infamous April package. There was a momentum. So now it seems that we are building up towards some kind of a new momentum that needs to be secured also by the new US administration, by some kind of a very probably new approach by the European Union to build up some strategic alliances and show basically that it takes only a little bit. It's a small step from dismantling Dodik and those guys and creating a true representation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The next elections, 2022, if we build strategic alliances with diaspora, with good people, with movements, etc., and if we put an extra effort, and if we are not basically disturbed by some internationals, I see basically as a kind of a big window of opportunity that we must not miss.
Thank you very much. Samir, we have a question on perception of corruption. I know you're not an expert for the perception of corruption, but since you are an activist, you talk with zillion million different peoples. When we speak about corruption, as I think Leila mentioned, we're talking about corruption quite a lot these days. Is there any difference between where we see corruption, or is it just a widespread thing? Is it health institutions that are more prone to corruption, judicial areas? Is there any specific area where one could even say, okay, let's address corruption in this area because it's so widespread, we start there to make a point in a wider society, in your opinion?
Probably, yeah, thank you. Probably we can speak where the corruption makes most harm. And probably judiciary would be one of the, when it comes to, upholding rule of law, even preventing corruption. And then we see that the corruption in judiciary is actually one of the biggest obstacles in order to curb corruption or bring to justice those who either engage in corruption or those who allow corruption to spread. Then when it comes to human lives, we can speak about corruption in health sector, where corruption is taking human lives. And even exactly now in this moment of global pandemic, of global crisis, we have seen that the corruption in public sector, which means, putting incompetent people on every possible place that we have seen now, that has caused human lives to be taken away. Exactly because of the fact that wrong people are in decision-making positions, wrong people are in hospitals, in ministries, in police bodies, wrong people are in crisis headquarters, that should manage this crisis. And then if you have wrong people there who have been engaging in corruption, then we will have on the ground these scandals, such as the scandal with ventilators, public procurement, corruption, etc. And I think corruption in when it comes to young people, it hurts us most probably in educational sector, because we do have young people raising up in educational sector being brainwashed because there are certain elements or certain power groups that want to push a certain nationalistic narratives within Bosnian educational system. And therefore, we do see a quite significant of young people leaving study abroad because they do not see a free, prosperous education, high quality education in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I am really, really sad because with this, with the Western Balkan Alumni Association that you mentioned, we try to gather and connect and bring networks of young people from the Western Balkans who studied abroad and decided to return. Many of them do not want to return because they do not see that this country will be able to deal with corruption in its great systemic way. And I really hear a lot of people who are in their 40s and 50s who say that they have regretted that they have stayed in Bosnia. They said we could have leave, or some of them even came back. And they tell me, for example, as a young person, they tell me, Samir, leave, because you will regret as we will regret. I am not one of those who says like, okay, I want definitely to leave. Like if you would ask me what do I want to do, I would say I want to circulate. But I would see it as my failure and my big disappointment if I would be in my 40s or 50s or 60s, and then if I would say, you know, I regretted for staying. I wished I was in Germany. And just to even conclude on this remark, I think in order for this not to happen, I think we as activists, as people who want to see our country prosperous, I think we need to be more united in unity than they are united in division, as they are, and that's why we are seeing what is currently on the ground.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to André to ask a question. I really don't know how this works, to be honest. Can you just turn on your microphone? Is that? Yes.
I think I did it.
Yes, you did.
Can you hear me?
Thanks for coming.
Hi, good afternoon. It's so nice to see at least 4 familiar faces. Thank you so much for all your insightful comments and the importance of diaspora also. I agree very much. I also agreed a lot with the comment of Amila Karadzic in the videos. She was very gracious, I think, and mild about the older generation, which I have called the old foxes in my briefing work for the European Parliament. I think that is more to the point. I'm enjoying my freedom there. I mean, I have a question on. Vedran was referring to. If you are going for joy and optimism, don't go to the Bosnian Parliament or to the presidency. I agree very much. I would even add, don't read the European Commission's report. And let's be humble, I'm from the European Parliament as a staff member, and maybe don't read our reports or our resolutions. I mean. I am deeply convinced that time has come really to go more into the specifics and to name and shame, but not only name and shame, mention the positive things, but also the negative things. And a positive thing, and I had the opportunity in early July when we met in Brussels, despite COVID, Samir, and we had that nice talk at Exki, to mention Jajce. Which is, this should be explicitly mentioned, including the Van der Stoel Award that it received, and this can really trigger a lot of extra hope for these people on the ground. I would also mention, and I will try behind the scenes because this, for me, is an absolutely horrible example. I was shocked already a year ago when I first read about this, and now even more, the Vilina Vlas Hotel or Spa Resort, as they call it, in Visegrad, and then this story about Corona vouchers given to people to have a nice weekend in Vilina Vlas. I mean, this is really, I think we have a moral duty to also mention these things. I would like to know how you would look at that. And then my second question would be about the Conference on the Future of Europe. There is a lot of talk about it. I have been in contact with people from the cabinet of Dubravka Šuica, and they assure us that, yes, there will be a role for the Western Balkans without entering into detail. To me, this also falls into the category of the moral obligation. In all our boring EU declarations and statements, 20 years of repeating the European perspective, but also about saying that the future of these countries is in the EU. If the future is in the EU, then the Conference on the Future of the EU should obviously include them. What would be, to whoever who would like to comment on this, what would be your, and I now deliberately use this word, but in a much more realistic and positive sense, your perspective on the role of countries of the region, including, of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina, in this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Randall, I would like to go to you, especially with this question about dealing with the past as part of the value system in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There's a lot of talk recently about Bosnia and Herzegovina needing to adopt a law that will prohibit negation of genocide and the war crimes. From your research, but also from your experience of living in Bosnia and Herzegovina and seeing how Bosnians and Herzegovinians deal with the recent past. Could you share a couple of your thoughts on that?
Well, I have to admit that the parts of the survey that would really deeply address this is something that I haven't myself written about because I'm coming from perspective of political science. I mean, I think it's clear to everyone with divided educational systems that there's a huge need and a really just a simple lack of information, right? Let alone the ability to really understand, to critically think, to understand other narratives. I mean, I think anyone who follows Bosnia is not surprised by that. I maybe, since I have the floor, I actually would take the chance to focus on something specific about where will this energy come from, because some of my research is really exactly about activists and what they have been able to achieve and not able to achieve. And for me, the one of the conclusions from 2014, which I think was a really important event, and those protests and the floods that happened also, but is that there's a real trend for activists to go local, I would say. So to focus on something really concrete, achievable, and I could give you lots of examples of that. But the challenge for me, I mean, I like to think about it as local first, because the challenge is how to not just focus on these very concrete things, but to keep at the same time a view of the political reality, right? So I think Samir mentioned about needing to support each other, solidarity, right? So that's often for me what's a little bit not quite there yet. People are so focused on beating their heads against the really difficult and unresponsive political system, trying to achieve something, but keeping note of what else is happening. So if it's local first, right, then there comes a moment where it really needs good organization. There's lots of lessons about how to do that, and very specific things about what would work in a Bosnian, what has worked in a Bosnian context, which is a pointer about what. So just to mention a couple really quickly. I mean, I think international support is absolutely crucial in a constructive way, because often it's not constructive. My reading, Samir, from the experience in Jajce would be that was one where the international role after the immediate success wasn't very constructive. But you may see that differently. But I think the role of NGOs is important, not because NGOs are civil society, but because NGOs bring resources, and if they want to help, they can research shows make movements successful or not successful. And there are again examples of atypical organizations that are not just stuck in following donor agendas and so on. And then the last thing is I keeps talking about don't adopt a view of politics which is called anti-politics, right? Which is I will be political, which is by not talking to anybody in politics. That's for me, again, a lesson from 2014 is if you're not willing to actually sit down in Skupština of Canton Sarajevo and make some demands, it's really going to be hard to make change, right? So I'll close with that.
All the excellent points. Samir, I would like to give you a minute maybe to address this question on whether Bosnians and Herzegovinians, in particular young people, can discuss about future of Europe and maybe your experience from the conference that was organized as part of the German EU presidency.
Yes, excellent, very relevant question. Just like I think 2 weeks ago, or even less, maybe 10 days ago, we were attending. I was like during the last 3 or 4 months. I was part of a group of young people from the Western Balkans who put together a paper about how to move forward, especially when it comes to brain drain and brain circulation. And Adnan also, he was really kind to help us put together this paper. And we did have a really constructive conversation and discussion with Commissioner Šuica, who said that she does see Western Balkans and especially young people from the Western Balkans taking part, and its governments taking part in the Conference on the Future of Europe. And as such, this is a breaking point and really a key moment in this path towards the EU, because having representatives of the Western Balkan governments at the Conference on the Future of Europe is something that we have been striving and something we see as really necessary, especially for the young people, because I think this will give also hope and it will be an additional sign to the young generations of the Western Balkans that Western Balkans, including Bosnia and Herzegovina, is moving forward towards the EU, and that the young people should become EU citizens together with its own region, Western Balkans, because currently now young people from the Western Balkans are joining the EU with or without their own countries. A lot of them has joined already the EU and became EU citizens in the last 10, 15 years without their own respective Western Balkan countries.
Thank you, Samir. Sadly, we are almost at the end. Alida and Vedran, I have two last very short questions for you. One is, if you could think about 1996, what is a bad thing from 1996, that means just after the war ended, that has improved and that has surprised you that it has improved in such a dramatic way by today? And what is a bad thing today about Bosnia and Herzegovina that you would like to be significantly better in 10 years? If you want, while you think, I can tell you two my things. My first thing is borders and how we cross across different cantons, different entities. I still remember vividly when I was coming back from Croatia as a refugee, we had 3 borders that we needed to pass inside Bosnia and Herzegovina alone. I was afraid we had to go around Doboj to come back to my home. And really, it's a surprising element that today basically you can travel. If you go to Cyprus, if you go to Northern Ireland, if you go to some other areas, you see how much in Bosnia and Herzegovina the situation is better. There's something bad that I would like Bosnia and Herzegovina to be better in future, is exactly what Randall said, and that is our attitude towards being a politician and towards engaging with politicians. Alida or Vedran, who wants to go first?
I could go first if you want.
Please.
I was just about to see you've taken that one from me. It's really like, I remember that moment vividly because I sat in the car with my dad and we could not believe that we can actually drive around for 20 minutes around without being stopped, because I think it has came with the license plates that were neutral. Basically, that was one of the greatest probably decisions by the international community, imposing these neutral license plates where you could sort of, go anywhere, but no one would be able to pin down where you exactly come from, where your car is registered. So that would be maybe one thing. But there is another one that I've heard recently about. It's finally in 2020, Sarajevo is mine-free zone, or at least one area around Sarajevo is mine-free zone, which I think is huge, because I remember as a kid, we would be running around and every now and then you would just see all these bombs and mines really everywhere, like on a display. So I think that's a great thing. As for the bad thing, I mean, I could go on and on and on. What really bothers me, there are some emotional issues for me as well. One would be terrible, 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 unacceptable pollution that prevents me to enjoy my city in all possible ways, not only during winter, but also during summertime. And the second one is this toxicity of politics. The way we sort of, the way it's being, the narratives are being crafted and designed and taken over by different people. Sometimes, unfortunately, the young ones, like why people, I mean, it's connected with education, that we're not able to think pragmatically about things, that we have no vision about certain things, and that we're not able to discuss things 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the things that are much greater than us, actually. So yeah, that would be maybe that.
Great points. Vedran?
I mean, the first one is very emotional. Basically, I was expelled from my home city of Predo in January '93, after months of hiding and sitting in the apartment, fearing what's going to happen to the family and to myself. And then I came back to my home country for the first time. Was it May 1996 or June? And I mean, I was crying all the time, but what I discovered basically is that this is my country. I mean, this is the spot, and this is, and that will be a spot for many Bosnians or Herzegovinians that left and that will keep coming back. And in a distance, I mean, 96 and the tears, and now 2020, with a certain distance to the war, we still remember the war on a daily basis. That's part of us. But in a very paradoxical way, we learned how to embrace, to a certain extent, this tragic experience and start step by step turning it into something new. And that gives me really a kind of a hope. But 2020, I mean, what I believe is fundamental, and what I cannot, I mean, I'm just simply lose any patience, is basically this kind of ethno-fascism, I would even say, that we see in so many institutions and minds, not only among political elites. And I believe, and I mean, this is horrible, but this is the moment that we basically join a fight that's a global fight. I mean, we see what Trump is doing right now. It's not precisely the type of ethno-fascism, but we have it, and we have those tendencies all over the world. And basically the fact that the radical defense of the human being starts with fighting that type of politics and that type of attitude, and that this is a common fight. This is a European fight, this is a global fight, and this is a Bosnian fight. And stand up in the defense of the human being is basically the way to go forward for Bosnia.
And thank you both. This is actually the point that kind of is emotional for me, in a sense, when I read the things that are being written and published on the Dayton Peace Accords, and when I see images from Nagorno-Karabakh, when I see debates about property, about returns, about seeing the images of people being expelled from their homes is something that makes me a bit proud and a bit happy about what we've achieved with the help, obviously, of the foreigners. I would like to end with Samir. Samir, what is a good thing about Bosnia that keeps you in Jajce, and what is a bad thing that you want to change?
I think good thing is its people, especially young people. When we had this conference 2 weeks ago, the moderator Adelheid Wölfel, who was moderating this youth event, she asked us, okay, what do you expect from politicians and what do you expect from you? And I said, well, to be honest, I expect much more from us, young people, than from politicians, because we have been, they have like seen as deaf. Like our demands have fallen on deaf ears when it comes to politicians. So, trick me once, shame on you, trick me twice, shame on me. And in that sense, I really do not trust Bosnian politicians, especially those who have been in power for the last 25 years. I also do not trust young people who are nationalistic, fascist, racist, anti-immigrant, who are in politics, despite of the fact that they are young. I do believe, progressive young people, and not just young people, everyone who is progressive and who is like thinking in a way that has a vision in the next 20 years, 30 years, to stay here, and not just allow us to stay here and to build our prosperous future, not just for ourselves, but to think in a way that how should we make Bosnia and Herzegovina a place where other people would be migrating here, and not just because they were prosecuted by the war, but also because, that they come from Germany, from Spain, from France, to the places and to the countries where we are going. And I think this summed up all the positives and negatives and your questions. I would say.
Thank you. Then let me, as last, go back to Randall, because he's the person who came from the US and lives in Bosnia and Herzegovina for 18 years. Was there at any point that you wanted to leave Bosnia and Herzegovina because of something that was happening, obviously, in Bosnia and Herzegovina during your time there?
Actually, I would say no. I mean, I think maybe the issue that's the most personally difficult for me is corruption in healthcare, because on other things, I think it's possible to really to really resist, even if you're willing to bear the consequences. On healthcare, it's someone's health in question, and it's also somehow to see how people are participating in that. How the medical professionals are participating in that system. And I'm always encouraged when I see, on the other hand, the people who absolutely. There's so many examples of courage, right? Like people who simply refuse to participate. Doesn't matter what anyone around them thinks. So kind of one of my dreams is actually to collect all their stories and talk about that.
I encourage you to do that. I apologize to our viewers that we've stayed 8 minutes longer. Anyone who has watched my moderations knows that is very rare, but I wanted it because this topic is important also for me. I would like to again thank organizers, to Stephanie and Hannes. I would in particular like to thank Luka Ćekić, who is the most visible but the most invisible at the same time. He provided technical support not just throughout today, but in days, weeks, and nights before. So I really thank him a lot, and I invite everyone to join us on 14th of December, where we will be discussing at the same time. We will be discussing what the EU can do to support all these elements that we have been discussed, possibly positive trends, but also how to help mitigate or lower down negative trends that we discussed. And yes, join us. There will be quite a good speakers, and we hope it will contribute to a wider debate on the Dayton turning 25. That would be from us, and yes, see you on 14th of December. Thank you to the panelists, and good night. Enjoy your evening.